Okay, so once again, thanks everyone for joining. And I can say that both me and Masood, we will probably be behaving a little bit like school kids because our today's session is not just a matter of pride for us, but it's a matter that makes both of us, along with the other members in the organizing team, feel very, very, very humbled. And that is because Anandada himself has so kindly agreed to meet all of you again. And I must also add that since we have a habit of seeking who is to be credited for what, I'll just say one thing for our participants that if anyone has to be credited for this, it's you. Your love, your inquisitive queries have brought Anandada once again back for this particular edition of this add-on course. And we have no words to thank you, Anandada, for once again joining us. But yes, in between, something else also happened, which made all of us very, very proud. I'm talking about Banu Mushtaq's book, the translated book that is, winning a very prestigious award. And probably today's session will center around that wonderful book, which I'm sure will be changing the way the rest of the world looks at translated literature from India. So I'll not waste a second more. I'll just hand over the session to Anandada and to you, our dear participants. Whatever is happening because of you and Anandada. So it's all yours. Over to
Thank
you.
you. Thank you, Devaditya. Actually, I should add to Devaditya's thanks to me, a genuine thank you from my side, because it just occurred to me that there were, of course, questions that remained somewhat untreated the last time that we met. So I had been thinking about those, because I never like to keep things incomplete. But then, as all of you know, as all of us know, when we do talk, when we do lecture, nothing is 100% perfect and complete. And so things do get left behind. So I have no real problems with that happening. Unless, of course, there were specific requests for a particular question or area that was thought to be perhaps untouched or not that touched upon as much as perhaps should have been. So that's by way of the explanation for this particular session. But more importantly, what Devaditya has mentioned did happen since the last time we met, which is the International Booker for Translation being awarded to Heartlamp and not just the author Banu Mushtaq, but of course the translator as well, Deepa Rashti. And that was what made me think of requesting Devaditya once again that since this has happened, this actually is a wonderful instance of a case study, let me put it that way, whereby what I had talked about in the past sessions, beginning with the tools for translation and then carrying on into transliteration, we can actually discuss this again. You see, the original being in Kannada makes it actually a very neutral territory as far as we are concerned. I really don't know how many of you are well acquainted enough with Kannada as a language for you to be able to comment on it. I certainly cannot. As a language, I have zero competence in Kannada. And I would suspect that the jury members for the award would also not have had that much awareness. I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt, not much awareness of Kannada as a language. Perhaps somebody or the other did, but I haven't really homeworked that area, so I can't tell you for sure. Obviously, when a jury awards a prize, there are more than one member concerned who agree that this particular book is worth awarding. And most of them in this case would certainly not have known Kannada. So they are judging on the basis of the translation. Now, the neutrality of the subject is that because we, correct me if I'm wrong, and by all means, if somebody actually knows Kannada, they can perhaps raise their arms or hand or whatever in response. It means that we too are just as, to some degree, clueless as the jury in this particular case. So we could probably approach the matter of translation with just as much of a clean slate, a tabula rasa, as the jury members did. And this is where my first point comes into play. I'm sure many of you actually, not just some of you, many of you might in fact have read the full book. But what I would like to do first is to read out, so that everybody knows this, what the translator, Deepa, says about italics. You remember that topic that we touched upon last time, as well as annotation. Now, here is what she says in her translator's note. I was very deliberate in my choice to not use italics for the Kannada, Urdu, and Arabic words that remain untranslated in English. Italics serve to not only distract visually, but more importantly, they announce words as imported from another language, exoticizing them and keeping them alien to English. By not italicizing them, I hope the reader can come to these words without interference, and in the process of reading with the flow, perhaps even learn a new word or two in another language. Same goes for footnotes. There are none. Now this, as I have already alerted you to, this approach is something that is actually quite commonplace in translated literature into English. I will go back to certain words over here so that you can kind of, in that sense, be aware of how I'm highlighting them. Italics serve to not only distract visually. I wonder where that is coming from, because this actually is exactly the kind of thing that the publisher will tell you. Yeah, because the publisher doesn't want that extra headache of having to italicize words that you might have italicized in your Word doc that you sent them. But when they very often put that Word doc into the whatever software there is for publishing that they use, I don't want to get too technical about this because we just have a 1-hour session over here, but you are probably aware of this. Very often, unless you give them a particular command, the italics disappear. So you would have to reinsert those words again if the translator insists on having italics. And this particular remark, italics serve to not only distract visually, seems to be coming straight from the publisher's mouth. Uh, I'm obviously not saying that she herself, Deepa herself, doesn't think the same way. She probably does. Otherwise, why would she be doing this? Why would she be writing this? But also, I don't understand why it should distract visually. In fact, to me, the idea of full page or pages which are only in one font, that alienates me visually. If you get the picture, literally the picture. Occasionally, italics are a good kind of not distraction, but a complement to what else is there. And there is, of course, a long history of italicization in literature. In obviously, we are talking about literature in English, but also in translation. Italics have been there for a long, long time. So where this is coming from, distracting visually, I really actually don't understand. Deepa goes on to say they announce words as imported from another language, obviously. What's wrong with that? Exoticizing them? No. They don't exoticize them unnecessarily. And I would suggest to many of you, in fact, probably all of you know of, for instance, just as one example, Eliot's The Wasteland. Now, there are many such cases where you actually have italics as, kind of announcing that these words are from elsewhere, and we are using them from elsewhere. So it's perfectly legitimate. They are not being exoticized and alien to English. Not at all. And then Deepa says, by not italicizing them, I hope the reader can come to these words without interference. Does Eliot really interfere with your reading of his poetry? And we can talk about Eliot also with reference to footnotes. You know how many notes he uses in various places. I would argue that these notes are required. So at least from the reader's perspective, you know that, of course, Eliot is the original poet. The original poet wants you to know of these allusions, these references. And then Deepa says, in the process of reading with the flow, perhaps even learn a new word or two in another language. This is, I'm afraid, something that she is not doing. We are not, in fact, learning a new word or two in another language if we are not told the meaning of that word. The sound of another word in another language is meaningless unless we have the meaning, right? So it's not it's not a question of italics exoticizing or alienating. It's a question actually of the other way around. The translator in this case, Deepa, herself is exoticizing or alienating by using words that she is not providing the meanings for. Okay, now that is, of course, the theory behind it. Let me now come to specific cases, because, I mean, we don't have to spend too much time on this, but just to prove my point, so that we know what we're talking about. When I think I did say this in that last session with you, the translator's job is full disclosure. Okay, so where is this full disclosure happening if you have some words which don't give you full disclosure? And you can't hide behind a screen, like the screen of a zenana. I'm deliberately using that word because that's an obscuring screen. The curtain or the screen behind which lies the zenana obscures. It is not giving you full disclosure. So that's my perspective on this particular approach. Let me give you instances so that you know what I'm talking about. I'll just deal with the first story. Possibly more people among you, more readers among you have actually read the first story. They may not have completed the rest of the book. So this might be a good enough beginning for what I'm about to say. There are several exclamations and interjections that obviously Banu has herself used and Deepa has also used. Let me give you some examples. Array, A-R-E-Y, in the English spelling. Che, which probably is Che, but I don't know. If anyone knows Kannada, they can please tell me right away. C-H-E, probably a Kannada equivalent of Chi, the Bangla interjection that is similar. Then the word from South India, which, and again, South India is a huge region, but that we are all familiar with, Ayyo, another exclamation. And the word Thu, T-H-O-O, which obviously applies to spitting. Right. Now, in context, it might be possible for us to make out the meanings, but I doubt that people outside India would actually understand Array. So if you just toss it in, what are you doing? What are you achieving? Wouldn't it be better to actually have a note saying that this is an interjection that says whatever you want to define it? A very common exclamation. Chi is probably even more indecipherable if it is spelled C-H-E. Yeah. Ayyo, in context, we Indians will understand, but out there, who else will? And Thu, T-H-O-O, will strike most English readers outside India as possibly a misprint. That maybe it is T-H-O something or T-H-O-U, which is of course archaic, who says thou nowadays, or is it T-H-E? So why are we indulging in this itself kind of exoticization? Without just single thing, either you translate the word, or you leave it out, or you give a note explaining what it is. Right. Let's proceed to another area. There is a very nice description. Some of you might remember it, where Banu is talking about is raising various words for husband. So she uses now I myself actually have lost the page, but she uses the Kannada word. She uses, in fact, there are two Kannada words. One is the more literary word, and there's the more colloquial idiom. And then, of course, she uses the much more common Indian word for husband, which is pati, which most of us will understand. And in most of these cases, she actually uses these Kannada words, and then also explains. So she's using it and explaining it in the sentence itself. Yeah. Oh, okay, great. Nandini has said page 7. Yes, of course. Exactly. Thank you so much, Nandini. So there is over there, it's the first page of the story itself. Manu says, if I use the term, the first of these, this actually doesn't apply to husband. If I use the term yajamana, now yajamana I would say is probably equivalent to Bangla as we use antusto, yo, jaw. And over here, she explains it. I use the term yajamana and call him owner. Okay, so that is okay if you are actually explaining in that very same sentence. And then she says, she writes, I do not like establishing these owner and servant rules. And then she goes on. So then shall I say, within quotes, GANDA for husband. Now you tell me, I don't know the pronunciation of this. Not knowing Kannada, I don't know this. So it's fine, but I mean, not knowing the original pronunciation is fine. They're not using diacritical marks, as I've said, that it's not imperative, but it does help if you want the pronunciation to be conveyed to use diacritical marks. But it's not imperative, it's not essential. And you can think that obviously that this is related to husband because she says so, she explains it. And then she says that also is too heavy a word, as if Gandantara. Again, I am probably pronouncing it wrong in Kannada. And then she again explains a big disaster. So that we know. So she's providing translations of these Kannada words as she's going along. This is probably the translator doing this over here. Obviously, why would Banu want to explain that word to a Kannada reader? Because the Kannada reader would know it. So Deepa is explaining, right? So she knows the other trick that you can use in translation. If you're applying an original Indian word in the translation, then you explain it without having to footnote it. Okay, that's perfectly all right. And then she says, I could suggest that I use the nice word pati for husband. Here, of course, virtually all Indians would understand what pati is. And then she carries on. She does say that this is not very popular colloquially. It is a very bookish word, but still other Indians can understand it. Then she says that for pati, and this is an interesting page, an entire page actually, which gives us these problems of translation. One uses the word pati there. This is on the next page. There comes an urge to add devaru to it. A common practice. Again, we can understand devaru, equating one's husband with God. Yeah, but then again, she's explaining it a little, equating one's husband with God. This is the translator who is doing this. So that's perfectly okay. Now, if you don't explain it, then you are obliged to footnote, because otherwise what happens is that the English reader just will not get it. And that is abdicating the translator's job of cultural transference. Okay, either you explain in the text or you footnote. Let me give you other examples of this. Further down, you have references to the other couple in this story. You probably know they are Iftikhar and Shaista, right? And there are mentions of Iftikhar Bhai and Shaista Bhabi. She leaves it as that, Bhai with a capital B and Bhabi with a capital B. I would say, excuse me, I think that does need footnoting. Why that? Because otherwise what a reader might well think, who doesn't know what the word bhai or words bhai or bhabi mean, is that those are their surnames. Or those are some other kind of middle name. Right? So that is itself going off the track. And immediately you understand that Indian words like these bhai and bhabi, of course, literally mean something, but colloquially, they have a relationship status. Obviously, they are not, these two couples are not related. But we address others as dada, didi, bhai, etc., don't we? So that is also important to annotate for someone who is reading it wherever in New Zealand or in Canada, who doesn't know the Indian culture at all. Now let's carry on further. So to give you some different examples that I've compiled from different areas of human activity, the word badsha. She uses this. Now this word badsha would have been in English dictionaries 50 years ago or 100 years ago, because it was fairly commonplace. The word Shah is still there, but Badshah would not be understood by today's English reader outside India. So we are losing, actually, this is the disservice that some translators do. We are losing our readers from gaining the richness of the Indian experience. Remember, I talked about mythological names. Invariably in Indian literature, we will find them. Here, one of these key instances is the narrator's husband sleeps soundly, endlessly, never wants to wake up, and there's an allusion to Kumbhakarna. All right. Now, the spelling that is used very often in Southern Indian languages, you have um, uh, spellings that use, for instance, that don't use the aspirated consonant. In this case, kumbha. Now, Deepa in English has spelled it Kumba, Kumbha Karna. All right. Now, this poses a double problem. Firstly, there is no indication in that passage of who Kumbhakarna is. All right. This, again, to me, is a problem, because it means that the reader, if they want to know who Kumbhakarna is, would have to Google. And more often than not, you know, why does Banu use this character or this name? Because they don't even know it's a character until they Google, right? This name Kumbhakarna. And when you Google, you will not get Kumbhakarna, you will get Kumbhakarna, because that's the correct transliteration. So again, we are losing out. We meaning the reader in English who doesn't know the Indian source texts or cultural texts, right? So a one-line note would have sufficed, because Kumbhakarna, we all know, is famous for sleeping. That's it. That's all we require. Then there is an Indian, obviously it's a Kannada word, but it's also used elsewhere, because it is used, I checked, in Marathi. It's used in other Southern Indian languages as well. This is Sambrani. Sambrani as applied to a particular fragrance. Okay. Now, I didn't know of Sambrani. So how did I have to find it? I did Google, but the Googling actually gives you just two options, and you'll have to then actually search quite a bit to get the full meaning. One option is the fragrance itself, which is related to frankincense. And the other option is the plant from which the fragrance comes. And actually, there is a perfectly satisfactory English translation for Sambrani, which is benzoin. It's in the English dictionaries. Benzoin. Benzoin, from which actually the name Benjamin, you are all familiar with. Benjamin is a corruption of benzoin. It's an Arabic Hebrew word. And that very same word, benzoin, it's in the English dictionaries, is also the specific name for the plant. The plant is styrax, Styrax. Styrax, benzoin, Benzoin. No explanation whatsoever. So what are we taking back with us? We just know this Sambrani as a fragrance. We do not know where it comes from. This is important for us to tell the readers that it is this plant and it is coming from, or just translate it as benzoin, Benzoin. But if you want the sound of Sambrani to remain there, fine, no hassles whatsoever. But then please footnote That's your duty. And these are the things that translators, in their rush to finish, do not complete. They leave things hanging because they think that maybe we can't find the correct word. I wonder if Deepa actually did look for Sambrani in lexicological, lexicographical sources, dictionaries, Kannada to English, whatever. And maybe she would have found benzoin, and then she would have looked in the English dictionary. It's common English word. It's there. Right. All right. You want to use the Kannada sound? Go ahead, but please explain it. She does a similar thing with the word saru, SAARU, which is, of course, from the realm of, from the culinary realm, from cooking. Again, I do not know what saru is, so I looked it up and I found that it actually links to rasam, right? The Tamil, the very familiar favorite dish in Tamil and many of us as well, rasam. So it's kind of Kannada rasam. She just uses it as pepper saru. Now, again, we are not gaining anything from that phrase pepper saru, except for the fact that pepper is an ingredient. What is saru? So in these cases, like Sambrani or saru, the translator in this particular case is actually pushing the reader to go to Google, to be on their own. Now, what I'm saying is that why? Why can't we give the reader the meanings on the very same page as notes? Then they don't have to go to Google to find out what these are. If at all they actually find, because as I told you, Sambrani has two different pathways which you can track. So it's taking you actually about 10 minutes to sort out Sambrani from Google, or Saru for that matter, when just the word at the bottom of the page, translated or annotated, would have been fine. She uses the spelling of O-T-T-I, roti, for the common roti, R-O-T-I. Roti, R-O-T-I, is an English word. She uses roti without explanation. So it's a similar kind of issue over here. Now, maybe a lot of us will understand that it's actually roti, but why doesn't she just then use roti? Does she want to retain the indigenous quality of roti, the Kannada pronunciation? In that case, fine, no problem there, but please explain. She uses the very quaint Indian phrase Baba suit. Baba suit, of course, a cloth that babies, clothing that is worn by babies. But then what is that conveying to the non-Indian reader? Now, my problem is that all this amounts to reverse discrimination. We are now so proud of the Indian languages that we are saying literally, go to hell. Those of you who are not Indians, you find out for yourselves. Now, my stand is no. The Sahibs did that 100 years ago, 50 years ago. We don't have to copy them, do we? We should devise our own translatorial avenues, whereby we do not discriminate. We do not leave the Western reader or Southern reader out in the cold. Another word, very often in this book, actually, we come across Islamic vocabulary, which is obviously very important. And in this particular story, the word Fatiha is used because the narrator talks about the 40th day Fatiha, which those of you who know Islamic culture will understand immediately. But Nobody else will. Now, the word Fatiha actually is in an English dictionary. I looked it up. So there, it's fine. It's fine to use that particular word because it's there in the COD, the dictionary that I had suggested to you, I had recommended to you, with one difference, with one huge difference. The dictionary, the Oxford Dictionary, spells it with a capital F. That is extremely important. Deepa translates it with a small f. That is disrespecting the first surah of the Quran. Fatiha is just that. You must capitalize it. Now, I don't know, I'm pretty sure there are listeners here who come from a Muslim background, and therefore, you tell me, do you agree with me that Fatiha should be capitalized or can be left lowercase f? I would not take that risk. If you think it can be done, all right, perfectly okay, then Deepa has done it well enough. But, if I were her, I would have capitalized it because it's an extremely important, the introductory part of the Quran. Yeah, so these are just kind of samples that I've compiled from various parts of this particular story to give you what I feel in terms of the strategy or lack of strategy that the translator here has adopted. There are certain words which, like I told you with Fatiha, in fact, in the case of Fatiha, that Deepa is perfectly okay in using, because words like zenana, I used it myself. Zenana is used in this story, Zenana, and it's there in the COD. No italics, perfectly all right. No issue there. She uses the phrase hot samosas. Now, I have always encouraged translators to use doubling, because Indians in literature and common speech use gorom, right? Hot. So what's wrong with translating that doubly? Rather than hot samosa, hot samosa. Right? So that's perfectly okay. And samosa also is in the COD. You don't have to italicize it at all. Perfectly all right. The name in this particular story for mother, Amma, capital A, MMA, is there in the COD. So it doesn't have to be explained. Even though, Deepa doesn't explain it, if you read the story, you will realize later when Amma dies that she's actually the mother. But then we don't need to have that explained because, as I said, the COD has Amma as meaning mother. The COD has ghee, GHEE. Everybody in the world now loves ghee for all its health benefits, right? 5 years ago, they hated ghee. They thought that, ghee was not so great, but I'm myself getting distracted. Okay, so ghee is in the COD. Mehendi, MEHENDI, is in the COD. Do not italicize them, perfectly all right. Okay. So, so that's my kind of takeaway from the first story of this particular book. And there are many other instances from the rest of the book where I do feel as a critic here, I would be justified in critiquing Deepa's translation as not 100% satisfactory, at least to me, because she is not opening the doors. She's using these words without letting the quote-unquote alien inside the door by explaining these particular words. Right. So this is perhaps, Devaditto, we can pause for a couple of minutes over here.
Yes, Anandada. I think
In case there is any kind of comment, question, we could, I could.
I I can see already a few, and Nandini has kindly raised hand. So
Yeah,
Nandini, please.
yeah.
Uh, I I mean I can see where you're coming from, but I actually liked Deepa's translation strategy. So I'll just put a counterpoint if you don't mind. When I was reading the book, one of the words that kept bothering me was mutawali. I didn't know what a mutawali was, and the second story it keeps recurring. I more or less understood that he was a religious person, but I read through the story and it didn't interfere with my understanding. But I didn't get it. And then I got bothered and I Googled. Googling is very easy nowadays. So this reminded me of the way I learned to read Bengali or English as a child. Very often we wouldn't get the real meanings of the words, but we got a sense and we got the story, maybe not precisely. And then because of repetition, I get the, and I mean, I find it important enough to go and Google Mutawali. So that is one aspect, and that is what Ioana and I have commented, that you can translate for anybody you like, but only, especially if it's an non-Indian reader, only a person who is actually invested in Indian culture, who is willing to take the trouble, is going to read the book. Otherwise, they are not going to read.
Now,
That's one aspect.
This is a problem, isn't it?
Yeah. And the other thing is...
The last remark that you made is itself a problem, right?
Yes, it is. It is.
Yeah. Well, that's one.
And I teach youngsters. I teach them electrical engineering. And this generation hardly listens to what you tell them. They have much more faith in Google, YouTube. So I think for them, Googling is an easier option than footnotes or italics. I'm just putting a different aspect. I'm not saying it should be like that. I'm just speaking from my experience. The other thing that I wanted to say is, if you look at the final writing, afterwards that Deepa writes, she mentions, I think I'll read it. I don't know whether I can find it. She mentions that I should have the Gustaki. Now, Gustaki has a translation. She could have just said that I have the I'm missing the word. I should have the courage, and courage is not the correct word. That I should have the audacity.
Audacity.
Yes. She doesn't say audacity. She says Gustaki, and I immediately felt that the connotation of the word Gustaki and the connotation of the word audacity is not the same. And then she says that Kannada does not only depend upon language, it also depends upon the hava bhava. Now, hava bhava is a Kannada word, but all Indian, at least Bengalis know what hava bhava is. Maybe it has a little different connotation. So that reminded me that when we are translating, we are not only translating for the European or the American, we are also translating for Indians who do not understand Kannada. And and for them, I think hava bhava is a better translation than anything she could have translated. These are not translations. These words she is using. So we often nowadays do this kind of code switching, and we are, I'm not happy with people using Kanoki and all these things, Karonki in Bengali. But sometimes I think that we can retain words from other languages. That is what we have been doing all our lives. Even table is a foreign language. When it has a better connotation, this is what I felt. And having said that, I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to pick your brain. I am currently doing a translation, and there is a word, moddahash. And moddahash is great, but it doesn't sound right. What do you think? Because it's just village people speaking.
Yeah.
So would you say keep it male duck, which sounds a little odd, but Drake sounds odder.
Keep it what?
Male duck. See, it says moddahash. Moddahash is really Drake. But moddahash doesn't sound right to me in that context.
Well, again, Nandini, it will depend on the context. Yeah. So, like Deepa has done, you can explain it within the sentence as you translate.
Yeah.
Or if you think that it requires further explanation, like Kumbhakarna, you would have to footnote. But, I mean, with all due respect to your views on Googling and online, in my own, because I am also a Googler, right? We all are. In my own experience, I just gave you 2 instances where I spent 10 minutes tracking down the word. I don't have that time. 10 minutes of my already old age have been taken away from me by having to Google. I found out the meaning when that translator could have given me the meaning on that page itself.
I get your point, absolutely.
Right.
It's just
so
two
that's the
aspects.
issue. We cannot use words just randomly, just for sound. There has to be a reasoning behind it. And that is what I fear many translators do not do. Yeah. We can talk about Modash later on if you have the context and we
I'll do that.
exchange that.
I'll do that. Thank
Over
you so
detail,
much.
because very often what happens is that there are 2 double meanings. There is punning, right?
Sure.
In that case, you must note it.
Yeah.
Because otherwise the translator is only going to get 1 meaning, and again, that's just 50% of the.
Yeah, that's an important point. Yes. Yeah.
Right. So, any other question then?
I can see a lot actually. Joanna is definitely willing to have some questions. She has actually written some. Somudro has raised hand. So I'll let Joanna have a discussion with you first. Then we'll come to Somudro.
Sure.
All right. Namaskar, sir. First of all, I want to say that I'm so happy to see you again, to listen to a wonderful lecture.
It's great to see all of you again.
Yes, that's a great opportunity. I think the course is a wonderful experience. And I was just thinking about the difference between exotization and foreignization, because I've read a review of this book, and the intention of the translator was not to exoticize words, or not to make them look different, but to bring the original culture. So this is like a translation technique, because this is a source culture oriented translation. And what I feel that in translation went so far that a lot of translators almost go to transcreation, because they think about target audience oriented text. So they facilitate this process of reception of the original text to such an extent that they divorce the original text from the culture. So don't you think that apart from this effort we have to take, to search in a dictionary, there is some advantage in this foreignization or exotization? Would you agree with this?
Well, this requires another lecture completely, because
yes.
as you know, transcreation is a different exercise. All right, it cannot be just defined or explained away in sentences. In fact, it was my father who coined that particular
I know.
way, and most commentators have misunderstood my father's purpose in using that word. They feel that transcreation, most commentators use transcreation to mean a free translation. Right? That is not the meaning of translation.
No.
Yeah. So, but most people think that that's the meaning. It doesn't give the translator full liberty to do whatever they please with the original. And you're absolutely right that should never happen. Yeah. So what the translator must do today, and in a certain sense, you can argue that transcreation in the corrupted way still is happening quite commonly, because as I said last time, translators take much less time than they should to translate. So as a result of which, the cultural baggage is being left behind, and it's not being carried over into the other to the other shores. So that is my purpose. That is what I'm getting at, is that as far as possible, you must try to get that entire 9/10 of the iceberg, which is below the 1/10 of the text in front of you. You must transport that whole thing across. Right? Of course, it might read very well in a kind of free translation, but that is actually not doing justice to the original, in my opinion.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah,
Yes, because
because the reader in the target language doesn't know
Mm.
the source language. So they have no basis for comparison.
Mm.
They are totally entrusting you, the translator, with this job. Are you fulfilling this job?
Mm.
Have you done it 90%? Have you done it 70%? Have you rushed and done it over 1 week and therefore you've done a 40% job? And that might win the award because the jury doesn't know any better. That is my problem. Yeah, you cannot just sprinkle words from Indian languages like you're doing with spices into a dish.
Mhm.
That is exoticization, not italics.
Sometimes, sir, I think, but this is very difficult. When I read Gitangel in the original, and when I compare it to what Tagore actually conveyed in the English language, I could see that even he himself gave up on transcreation because he kept, for instance, Maya.
Yeah.
He could have used illusion, but he knew that Maya is more than illusion. And I have the same problem with the word sadhana. I wanted to use the word endeavor, but sadhana is more than endeavor. So
Sadhana.
sometimes, yes, sadhana. It's
It's
more
there.
how to translate it into
Why are
English.
you bothering, Joanna? It's there in the English dictionary.
Yes,
Why do you have to translate words that already exist in English?
so okay, I understand. So we can accept that certain words are already well known.
Yeah. It has then sadhana has a long history behind it, which is why Tagore titled that book Sadhana.
Yes,
Because
I
he
know.
was aware of the English history of that word, which was there in Indology for at least 100 years before the book Sadhana.
But then
Tagore's book.
again, it's again, I mean, my audience would have to be interested in Indian culture, right? Otherwise,
No. Do
So,
you,
okay,
let me put it this way. Do you translate a French word which exists in English?
You're
Do you
right. That's all.
translate
We don't.
it?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
we don't, because we know it's
We
been
don't.
there. It's been currency in English currency for long enough, and therefore it is in the common English dictionary. So why would we have to translate it? You are assuming that people don't know. But the Oxford Dictionary, which is a corporate enterprise, has already done their research on the words that they have decided to include. There's solid justification, rationalization behind what they include in the one-volume common dictionary and what they leave out of it. So that means that there's enough occurrences of that vocabulary for it to be counted as an English word.
Oh, thank you.
Why
That's a great answer, a great clue for me because it solves so many problems that shouldn't be. Thank you so much. Thank you.
It actually makes translation a little easier, but I don't want to give the impression that translation is an easy job because, like I said, 9/10 of it is underneath, and we have to bring that out to the surface by these techniques of annotation or whatever it might be.
Okay.
Right,
Thank you so
Devaditto?
much.
No, thank you for the question.
Thank you, Joanna. Thank you, Ananda. I think now we should ask Somudro Bhai.
Yeah.
Sir. Drawing from the fact that you just said that there should be, you can use the double adjectives of words, the doubling of adjectives. I'm just feeling that it in Indian languages or in Bengali or in other Indian languages, it is quite common, it is quite understandable. But in English, the doubling rather seems a little awkward. I'm not actually putting my dissent to you, but could you please clarify it?
I understand what you're saying, Shomudra. 40 years ago, I had the same problem when, for instance, Rabindranath uses na 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 na. Right? We do this all the time in Bangla, right? It's very commonplace, but he prints it like that, right? So what do I do? Do I use just one no? Because quadruple no's or two no's or three no's might sound, what's going on in English. But again, do not assume that the English reader, the reader in English, won't understand this. They will get it. They will get it that in Kannada, this is a common occurrence. Hot, hot, that's fine. Yeah, so do not have any kind of, preconceived notion or picture of who is your reader in English. Drop that, because the entire language has undergone an entire sea change over the last 50 years, leave alone 100 years. Yeah, it's become the world language. You know how many Japanese words are in English? Now Korean is also coming in.
Yes, yes.
So,
French,
don't
German.
it has already been there. The European languages have already been there. I'm talking about new languages.
Yes.
Such a lot of Islamic vocabulary has actually entered English only over the last 30 years. And now they are there in the COD. So people understand. So revise your picture of the standard English reader. Okay. Right, Devaditya, I think we should carry on to the final part of it, because we are already coming near 8 o'clock.
Yes, Ananda, but unless you would like to leave early, which I am absolutely fine with. I think we have a couple more questions.
Oh, for this the first section?
Yes. Oh, no. I think it's fine. We can carry forward, because the rest are just comments. We can carry forward.
All right. Okay. Fine. So what I wanted to do, which I didn't succeed in doing last time, is because there were so many, really intelligent questions and probing questions from you last time, is I wanted to go back to my recommended transliteration chart, just because I had one query from someone which kind of suggested to me that I should explain a few more things before we close that particular chapter of transliteration. So I'm just going to go quickly through some of these Bangla letters, Bangla alphabets, so that we understand, all of you understand what I'm kind of trying to suggest to you, because all I'm appealing for is consistency in the system that you apply to your particular translation. And that system might change from one book of yours to the next book of yours, like mine did. From my Tagore's Plays book, I changed the system, made it more simple to some extent to my Rabindra Shangit book. So this depends on the particular context and times also. So as long as the system, the method that you apply is consistent, that's what we seek. Now, for instance, the first thing that I didn't say last time that I should have told you, and I will say now, is that as far as, I did suggest it last time, as far as proper names, proper nouns are concerned, yeah, you have every right to hold on to the way it is spelled in English by the holder of that name or proper noun. Okay, what do I mean by this? I mentioned last time, Rabindranath Thakur. All right, in English, he used to sign and write as Tagore. So there is no reason for us to have to spell his name as Thakur, because we have to be consistent with our transliteration. since he spelt his own name in that way, and all of us can use affidavits to legally change our names into a particular spelling using, double consonants, etc., like they do in numerology. That's our individual discretion. It's our prerogative. It's our right. So proper nouns don't have to be changed. If you are saying Rabindranath, if you're spelling it as Rabindranath Thakur, by all means do so with, again, unfortunately, because Tagore is so well known as a name, with a note saying that this is how Bengalis pronounce and spell the word. Right? So, so that's proper nouns don't come into the picture as long as, for instance, Buddhadev, you will say Buddhadev Boshu. Right? Another example point. Will you convert that to Bose because Professor Buddhadev Bose was spelt his name as B-O-S-E, and therefore you should use his preferred spelling, right? Otherwise, you would have to say B-A-S-U, and then again footnote saying that this is the way that he would spell and spell it in Bangla, and that's how we pronounce it in Bangla. But the English spelling that he adopted is B-O-S-E. All right, so proper names out of the picture. Now, in terms of the letters that we were that are in the alphabet letters that are there in your chart, a few things that I would need to point out is Chandrabindu. I don't think we talked about this last time. How do we use the Chandrabindu? Simply because it's become so irritating for me to find, especially in online spellings, the N of the Chandrabindu coming before the vowel. Right? You understand what I'm saying? Many scholars are also using that wrong transliteration technique. Why am I saying this is wrong? Let me give you a very simple example. Take the Bangla word Aadhaar. All right. Now, if you follow this new-fangled placing the N before the vowel, you would have to spell it in English as N-A-D-H-A-R, which I'm sure you will all agree is ridiculous. Right? Therefore, it is better transliterated as A with a macron over it, A, then the N, D-H-A-R, Aadhaar. Right? So Chandrabindus follow the vowel, not precede it. Okay. So that is with reference to the vowels. I think I had, just remind me once because I might have forgotten. I had dealt with the example of re, the recar, right? Do we use the little circle under it as in my chart, or do we use the dot under it? And the problem with the dot is that it gets confused with raw, to, tho, do, dho, raw, right? So that's why my adoption of the tiny circle under R for re, to distinguish it from raw. Raw has a dot under it, re has R with a tiny circle under it. This is something that also has a huge long tradition going back 150 years to the French. I think I had talked about this, but I'm just kind of repeating it in case we had missed out last time. Then we go to, let me see. Yes, the problem of BAW. Again, I might have mentioned it last time, but the question, remember, last time I think there was it was about, don't exactly remember the word, but let us say, for instance, the name Bikram, right? As you know, in Bangla, that is Ba, and we do not actually distinguish between the original, the ancient Va, which is used in most of the other Indian languages, which becomes Ba for us, and the actual real Ba, which is Pa, Pa, Ba, Pa, right? That Ba. We use the same letter, the same alphabet, Ba. And therefore, it is quite all right, even though the chart that I gave you distinguishes between them by using V for Vikram, because that is how most other Indians would spell it, because they use V, right? Vikram, Vijay, right? Vijay, whereas Bengalis would use Ba, so it would be Bijay, perfectly all right. Okay, so do not unnecessarily use a V if, however, your system is consistent enough. You have to remember that it has to be consistent. If you're going to leave out V completely, no problem whatsoever. Because in Bangla, that letter actually doesn't exist in print. Use the Ba. And then for words like, for instance, Shoroshoti, Tontoshoy Ba, that you would have to, you cannot use B over there because it will look ridiculous, right? Sarasbati, you can't. So because it is conjoined with Duntosho, you will have to use W, which is Saraswati, which is perfectly all right. Everybody in India and abroad will understand that. So you can avoid V safely. No issue there. You can use B for all Ba, except for the Yuktakkar with the Ba, which will become a W. All right. I hope I'm clear on that. A reverse problem is with Yaw, when there is no dot, which obviously becomes, which we pronounce as jaw, which is not to be confused with Borgyoja. Again, one of these issues of Bangla spelling as well as pronunciation. Now here, I again leave it up to you. I am not a tyrant that I will insist that, you know, you have to do it this way. You find your own method, but remember that yaw with a dot is actually yaw, so it should be Y. The minute you drop the dot, it becomes a J, and therefore you will have Jatra, which in Hindi or most other Indian languages would be Yatra, because that's the word, that's the original word, Yatra. But you decide whether you will choose Yatra or Jatra. Okay. And how would you distinguish between a yaw and Antasta yaw? Obviously, sorry, the jaw in Jatra. How would you distinguish between those in transliteration? You have the chart in front of you, but you don't have to use Y all the time. All right. If you feel that J is better, then go ahead. But just remember that there might be that perceived inconsistency with Borgyoja, which is a different letter altogether, completely different letter. Yeah. And similarly, between the three sibilants, Talibusha, Dontasha, Muddanasha, Dontasha, you have to find your own via medium, because obviously only one of them can be transliterated as simply S. And if that's the case, then obviously Dontasha should be simply S. Whereas both Muddanasha and Talibusha could be SH. No problem there because they're pronounced like that. Now, whether you will use the diacritical above the S to denote Talibusha is your choice and the publisher's choice. That is up to you. Okay, I just wanted to clarify these matters of the transliteration chart, since I had received that one question, and I thought we should completely remove all doubts on that score. But still, if you have any questions on that transliteration, on the entire work of transliteration, go ahead. I have no problems with time.
Thank you so much, Ananda. So I open the session to our participants. If you have any queries, any questions, I'm not trying to sound too sentimental, but next Sunday, this time around, we will not be having this session again. So if you have any questions, this is probably the time to ask. Okay, so Ananda, I take again. Okay, Joanna, please, you can interact. I'll then.
Yeah, I have one question about Shakuntala, because I could see various ways of transliteration, like Shakuntala with SH and only with S. So which is, in your opinion, the best way?
Which language are you translating from?
Yeah, because it can be from Sanskrit. Okay, you're right.
So in Sanskrit, there is this entire system. So you would have to use the accent agu, the acute accent, on top of S. Now, if it is just an ordinary article, not a scholarly article, but you're still dealing with Sanskrit. Yeah, if it's just an ordinary article, feel free to use SH. Because that's how we, I mean, any Indian with that name, Shakuntala, will probably today spell it with SH. But if it is actually relating to an academic journal, a scholarly article, they would value the full 100% transliterated from Sanskrit chart, which is from where the Bangla chart comes. You probably have that anyway, right? I mean,
yes.
It's in fact it's easier. It's much easier than the chart.
There are so many inconsistencies between scholars. Everyone seems to have his or her own choice, and it's very confusing.
As long as you, within that particular article or book, use one.
Yes, yeah, definitely.
So that's okay. Here's another case where Banu Mushtaq comes in. Okay. I also, unfortunately, this is a very bad habit of mine, because I'm a proofreader, things jump out at me. Right, from the page, they literally leap up saying, Dr. Lal, Professor Lal, look at me.
Yeah.
So what happens in Banu Mushtaq's book is that there are two spellings of Sari, S-A-R-I and S-A-R-E-E. This is the proofreader's fault, totally. Any graduate with a proofreading kind of experience would have spotted that and would have said that, all right, use one or the other. Can't use both for the same word. Right. So as long as in your article or your book, which is more difficult, of course, you apply one spelling, but then obviously you will have to then apply that letter, which is sh, Talibya sh, right? In Sanskrit would have to, all over your article or your book, would have to be rendered in the same way.
The same way. And the same is, for instance,
either accented with an S above it or SH, right through.
The same question is for Upanishads. I usually use S and dot below S, But I
Again,
could see a lot
what
of,
is
again, they're the
what is
same.
it?
The same.
Yeah. So what is the
Same.
medium where you are publishing?
Okay.
Look at the Oxford Dictionary. Upanishad is there with an sh.
Yes, it is. Yes.
Sh.
But
If it's there, fine. Perfectly justified in using sh. It's there in English,
the
right?
same with Rig Veda, the same case. Rig Veda, the same
There's
case.
no problem with Veda because there is no alternative to the
Rig Veda, I mean Rig Veda, because normally we can say R with dots below, or we can just read R, I, and right. So
correct. Yeah. So again, as long as you apply the same system, if you are using diacriticals when you are writing about Sanskrit, then you have to apply diacriticals for every
however, yes.
word that's coming from Sanskrit. All right. Now you can always say as a disclaimer, and many of us have done that, I've done that too, that like the word you mentioned, Upanishad, where the word exists in the English vocabulary, then I'm not diacriticalizing it.
Okay.
It's no need to complicate matters.
That's true. That's
right.
true.
So if you use that line, then everyone will understand. But otherwise, any other word that's not there in the Common English Dictionary, if you are writing academically, then please apply the full-fledged transliteration chart from Sanskrit.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Welcome. You're most welcome.
Thank you, Joanna. And I think I should not say that I feel what Ananda keeps feeling about these questions, but probably I can guess a bit that these kind of inquisitive minds are what make a session worthwhile. So
it's not inquisitive. It's actually highly intelligent and probing. So that comes out of an entire, it's IQ really in a different way, in terms of the what needs to be done to express, to communicate the original as best as possible. That's what we are in the business of. Translation is just that. So these are highly subtle and intelligent questions which have to be sorted out constantly.
Absolutely. And I don't know, Ananda, if we can do this in future, but I will look forward to Joanna visiting our country, Nandinidhi visiting Kolkata. You are, of course, in Kolkata, and I am about 6.5 hours away. So who knows if the mysterious magician that whom sometimes we call God, Bhagavan, Allah, whatever, that he or she be willing, we will probably have some session in person, which will probably satisfy us more. But now I come to our student Lipika. I know Lipika cannot actually turn on her microphone because she's joining us from a very remote location, and it's a terrible weather we have here in Malda. So I'll just read out the query. Sir, you are saying the word rasam as an example, but there is another type of meaning in the culture as an example of rituals. I mean, I think হিন্দিতে একটা বোধহয় এরকম শব্দ আছে রাসাম, হিন্দিতে একটা আছে এরকম শব্দ রাসাম বলে.
Yeah, but you're talking about from Dravidian languages. So if you're talking, right?
Yes, I think what Lipika has in mind, I mean, I will request you to excuse the gaps in her question, but since I have been interacting her with for about 3 years, I probably know what she means. So actually I think what she's trying to say is that দক্ষিণ ভারতীয় এই রান্নাটির ক্ষেত্রে রাসাম means something, আর হিন্দিতে রসম নিভানে হোঙ্গে এরকম কিছু আমি শুনেছি। এই যে ব্যাপারটা, এবার রসম শব্দটাকে যদি ইটালিক্সে কেউ রেখে দেন,
You
এবং
have
সেক্ষেত্রে
মানে italics কিন্তু রাখতেই হবে কারণ ওটা ইংরেজিতে নেই। ক্যারি অন।
এবং যদি ধরো কেউ রেখে দেন এবং সেটাকে অ্যানোটেট করার সময় যদি রাসামের শুধু সাউথ ইন্ডিয়ান কনটেক্সটে যে মানেটা হয় সেটা বলা হয়, তাহলে কি সম্পূর্ণ হবে, নাকি সেক্ষেত্রে দুটোই বলে দেওয়া দরকার ডেসপাইট দ্য ফ্যাক্ট যে এক্ষেত্রে হয়তো সাউথ ইন্ডিয়ানটাই রেলেভেন্ট?
তুমি দেবাদিত্য, তুমি লিপিকাকে বলো, লিপিকা ওর নাম, তাই তো?
হ্যাঁ, লিপিকা, লিপিকা। ও শুনতে পাচ্ছে, ও শুনতে পাচ্ছে।
আচ্ছা লিপিকা, তোমাকে এই অ্যাডভাইসটা দিই। ব্যাপারটা হচ্ছে যদি সব শব্দের অন্য অর্থ যদি দিতে হয়, অন্য ভাষার অর্থ দিতে হয়, তাহলে তো আমরা পাগল হয়ে যাব, তাই না? রাসাম যেহেতু মূল রচনাটা এখানে কান্নাডা, সেখানে সারু বলে। এখন রাসাম শব্দটা প্রধানত তামিল ব্যবহার হয়। তো তাহলে আমরা কোন শব্দ ব্যবহার করব? তামিল থেকে ট্রান্সলেশন করলে অবভিয়াসলি রাসাম। আর তাহলে আমাদের আর কোনো ভাষার বিষয়ে আমাদের কিছু বলার দরকার নেই, প্রয়োজন নেই। হিন্দি অ্যাবসলিউটলি নট, there's no connection whatsoever. In this case, if it is কান্নাডা থেকে অনুবাদ হচ্ছে, তাহলে আমরা সারুটাই রাখবো। কিন্তু ফুটনোটে তাহলে লিখতে হবে যে সারু is the Kannada version of South Indian rasam or Tamilian rasam, and obviously you have to explain pepper saru মানেটা কি। কারণ আদারওয়াইজ আমরা বুঝতে পারছি না। সারু, শুধু সারু রাখলে আমরা বুঝতে পারছি না। রাসাম রাখলেও তামিল থেকে ঠিক আছে, কিন্তু এক্সপ্লেন করতে হবে যেহেতু এই শব্দটা ইংরেজিতে ঢোকেনি এখন পর্যন্ত। ইডলি ঢুকেছে, সাম্বার ঢুকেছে, দোসা ঢুকেছে, দিস ডু নট হ্যাভ টু বি আইটালিসাইজড, কিন্তু রাসাম এখনো ঢোকেনি। So you will have to use that in italics from Tamil if you're translating from Tamil, and then explain it what it is. We can't just leave it like that because it's something that needs explanation perhaps.
একেবারেই। So I'll now take the privilege of being a sort of a host, and I'll share with all of you something that I experienced while doing a very humble effort of mine. I was actually writing, and in connection with that, I'll come to a question. I'll probably try to arrive at a question for all of you, and especially Ananda. So it goes like this. A couple of years back, I was trying to write an essay for an academic book. Now, for this essay, I had to refer to Banglar Mesbari. Now, I apologize to people here who would not be familiar with what a Mesbari might be like. But see, the peculiar problem that I came across, I mean, the editors actually pointed out, it was not a translation, by the way, it was just an academic essay. Ultimately, it did see the light of the day as well. But when I was writing that essay, the editors, one of whom was an American, one was from Latin America, asked me, what does mess mean here? They live in a mess. So I had to annotate what a mesbari is for that article. And from that point of time, I started having this feeling. Now, I'm saying this with due respect to all the people who have delivered wonderful sessions for our course. I could see that a number of them are of the opinion that why should we bother to annotate so much? and why should we bother to not why should we not keep feeling that they can Google and find out? So see, first thing is there are certain words which will probably, and I'm actually reiterating what Ananda said, what we will probably not find by Googling, number one. And the second thing that I keep
Also,
feeling,
Devaditto, one other thing that I might point out over here, otherwise I might forget, is you'll get wrong answers in Google too. Nandini will probably know this. You get multiple wrong answers in Google. So Google is not the answer necessarily. Sorry, Devaditto, for intervening.
না আনন্দদা কোনো না, আমাদের একটা মানে অলমোস্ট কনভারসেশনাল জায়গায় যাচ্ছি, মাঝখানে কথা হবে। এবার the second thing that I kept feeling is that when I am translating a story, okay, fine, I can have this political stance that I am belonging to a culture which has history of being colonized by a certain culture, a certain country. That country still holds some position which make them more powerful to us for the geopolitical scenario, etc., etc., etc. But I keep on feeling that my primary purpose is to ensure that my message is received by the readers. And for that purpose, I think, number one, we have to ensure that our readers understand us. And I have recently started doing something, cannot disclose because it's not official, but what I'm doing is, when I am translating something from Bangla for an international readership, I am doing it in a collaborative way in which someone from Bengal is involved and someone who knows that particular form, because it's not just prose. It's not just prose. I can only give you this much. It's not just prose. So someone who has a sense of performative aspect for that particular form is involved as a collaborator. And then there is someone from the Anglosphere whom I have requested that, see, we are coming up with certain words which will try to retain the essence of the text. And then I know that since this is a performative text, there will be audience outside the country, and you have ample experience as a performer of this particular art form. So you be our sort of second pair of ears. Whether the words that we are coming up with would be too much for readers outside India. I don't know if this experiment will go terribly wrong. I don't know if we will be able to retain the essence of the text. But what the three of us are trying primarily is to ensure that the essence, as much as we can, is preserved. At the same time, if annotation is required, we keep having that. But yes, at the same time, making sure that we do not end up doing something like this, that there are 4 lines from the text followed by 40 lines of annotation. There should be a method in the madness, as someone very great had said. So Anandada, I would request your take on collaborative translations, if that can help us at all in such ventures. I could be completely wrong, but I rest my case here. I await your observations.
Yes, of course, Devaditto, there have been collaborative translations, lots of them. So especially I'm thinking of Bangla. It's not always successful. Let me be as frank as possible. It's not always successful simply because something or the other is missing. One of the languages has taken preference over the other. So, I mean, it is either as good or as bad as single translator enterprises. But I'm very happy that you're doing it, simply because I faced the same difficulty. 40 years ago, when I was translating Rabindranath's plays for the theatre. All right. So Rabindranath's plays, of course, exist in printed form, but My purpose 40 years ago was that I have to make sure that they're also playable, actable, stage-worthy, translated. Okay. So, and I'm just one translator. So what I did was that, again, I had to have recourse to annotation, where, and this is a place where I might give you the example of a cognate word to rasam, where, for instance, the word rasa, all of us knows, which is completely, which has not yet entered the common English vocabulary. So it's not there in the one volume dictionaries. And it is completely untranslatable simply because it has so many meanings. I mean, I've forgotten how many there are in my book, in the range of 10, all right, that you can choose from. Simply from Roche, which is just liquid, sap, or whatever, or juice, to rasa, the highest level of aesthetic flavor. Everything in between. So what does one do? So I devised the method whereby in such cases where the word is totally untranslatable, you use the original word, RASA, italicized, of course, that's my method. And then you have to annotate it as compactly as possible, saying that this word, which is, thousands of years old, carries all these associations. Depending on context in English, which of these 10 would you choose? And I've listed them. So I have a feeling I know what you're up to in terms of form, in terms of performing art form, but that's the way to do it. By all means, you can collaborate, but do not necessarily, you must not be pushed or think that you have to have one translated word. You use the original like Roche, and this will happen, for instance, in Baul songs, many other forms. And then you'll have to have either a glossary or a footnote that this word actually has 5 different meanings in English. So you list the meanings. You choose the 5 single word English equivalents from which the performer then in that language can choose. Take your pick.
Thank you so much.
If you have a better, or if you, Devaditya, if you have a better word, tell the English speaker, the native English speaker, if you can suggest a better word for, rather than these 5, go ahead. But I've given you the 5 associations.
This is excellent. This is an excellent suggestion, Ananda. I'll actually credit you for this. If
it's credit my book, not me. That's 40 years ago.
I always believe in acknowledging the process through which a book is born. Anyway, Joanna is probably reiterating my query. How about having a team of translators for separate parts of one word?
Oh, no team.
And my question is inspired by the project that my professor of Sanskrit is taking part in. They received like a European grant to translate Mahabharata into the Polish language, the whole. It has never been done. And some parts of Mahabharata are given to certain translators, and everyone does it his or her own way. So some decide to keep it in a poetical way, some in a prose way, some to transcript. So it will be like one work, but done by team of translators in different ways. So how would you comment on that? Because the final result can be kind of...
Joanna, there's a great danger in this.
Yes.
The danger is that a team gets very difficult to handle, to manage. So what you would end up with is out of the 18 parvas of the Mahabharata, you'll have different registers of translation. Now, this will be this will be extremely problematic for a reader Yeah, because they will immediately notice that it is inconsistent.
Inconsistent.
After all, the Mahabharata, I know, look, the Mahabharata is actually a compendium. It could not have been written by one person, right? Various hands have had it, but unfortunately have contributed to it. But unfortunately, we have it as one unified text. Have it as one unified text. Of course, it's up to you and your Sanskrit teacher who will decide the text, because there are different editions of the original Sanskrit text. The typical one to go for is the Bhandarkar BORI critical edition. That is considered to be the standard Mahabharata. My father had different opinions about it. Why should you leave out the other Sanskrit? We are not talking about modern Indian language versions, of which there are, hundreds. Yeah, but Sanskrit versions. Sanskrit versions, why should you leave out the Kashmiri? Why should you leave out the Bengali? Why should you leave out, whatever other? Yeah, so now that is a decision that the editorial team or your Sanskrit teacher will take. Which text, which edition? Having said that, the minute you have more than two people doing it, you'll end up with all kinds of inconsistencies. So, what you've seen what happened to Van Buitenen's text. You have, right? Van Buitenen's translation, the Chicago translation. Firstly, of course, he couldn't complete it, and therefore others took on the job. Yeah. For instance, like my father also couldn't complete the last 1.5 parvas, the major 1.5 parvas. So I assigned his closest disciple. This is important. Therefore, the Shishya, the disciple who best understands the Guru's practice, method, strategies of translation, to complete it. But in the Chicago edition, that's not what happened. So it kind of, it is already going in different ways after Van Buitenen died.
Remember, your father chose transcreation as a method because I read about it. So there's at least one method, and as you're saying,
but what
the master.
No. What is transcreation?
I'm just referring to Purushottam LAL transcreation Mahabharata. This is what I'm saying. But here, the danger is different because everyone takes different methods. So not only the team of people, but everyone is allowed to take different methods. So that is what arises.
See, that becomes impossible to handle. How do you justify different people using different methods?
Different methods, yes.
For different parts of the same epic.
The same can be awkward result.
Okay, since we're on this subject, let's define transcreation.
Okay.
Let's define transcreation. Why did he use the word transcreation? The original Mahabharata is in shlokas.
In shlokas.
Right? Shlokas are verse. Okay.
Yes.
Those English translators who have chosen to do the entire Mahabharata, I'm sorry, Devaditya, we are moving away entirely from Bangla. But those who have used...
Ananda, please carry on. I'll say something about this later.
Yeah, those who have used English have virtually every single one of them, 99% of them, have used prose. All right. Why have they used prose? They feel that if they translated in prose, they would be more faithful to the original. All right. My father said that how at all is it faithful if you are not using verse? The original form is poetic verse. The minute you're moving into prose, you are already being unfaithful. Therefore, transcreation for him meant that he will transcreate into poetry, into equivalent, corresponding for line stanzas
Mhm.
in English poetry, in English translation. Therefore, using the verse form, impossible to duplicate the shloka form. You know, you're aware of the shloka form, which typically has
Yes,
two lines, long lines.
Mhm.
Possible in English to duplicate, but create a kind of quartet stanza form in verse of 4 lines, which corresponds. But it's poetic. It
Right.
is not, cannot be prose except for those passages in the original Mahabharata text which are in prose,
Tiny proofs.
of which there are some. Those are actually easier to translate because originally they are in prose, so you can render them in prose as well in English. So hence that word transcreation, the minute you are transcreating, the minute you're rendering into poetry, this applies in Bangla also, from Bangla to English. The minute you're doing that, you are running a major risk of moving away from the original meaning.
Mhm.
Right? You understand why?
Yes,
Because
yes.
it's virtually impossible to capture. Because you have to keep meter in poetry. So how much are you going to pack in? The stuff that you get in Banu Mushtaq's translation, for instance, of explanation, you can hardly do that into poetry. Hence the word transcreation. I'm transcreating as if I am Vyasa. I mean, this is major kind of pomposity, but my father never said that. As if I am Vyasa or the poets or whoever writing in English. Translating, not translating, but writing, creating in English.
In the present time.
Yes.
For the
Obviously,
present audience.
translation is for the present. You cannot translate for 100 years ago. Nor
Yes,
can you
but
100 years later, because you don't know what the language will be 100 years later.
Yeah, but I just wanted to emphasize that this is target oriented translation. That we just
what orient?
I remember. I think it's Prof. said that it is never ending process. So there is no one type of but we have to renew this process with time. This is what I wanted to say. That when time flows,
of
this
course,
is somehow outdated. Yes.
Yeah, translating itself is a constant process because new translators will come in and they will translate anew. That's the way it is for every generation.
For your audience also.
There will be new readers. Yeah. So that's a different thing. The idea of having, however, a team at work is for me problematic. 2 people I can understand. One for the source language, one for the target language, and coming together, especially in such complicated matters like Devaditya was pointing out, what happens to, for instance, a performance text. Yeah.
And definitely one technique of translation, right? Definitely one technique, not different methods. Yes. This is what I hear. Okay. Thank you for your comments. Thank you so much.
No. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll still ask if anyone has anything to ask, and if not, we will have to move towards the formal closing. Although I really don't feel like ending the evening, but every good thing has to end, or at least for that time.
Like Devaditya has said before, any one person is most welcome to email me if they have specific inquiries, problems.
I'll be sharing your email ID on the group.
Of course.
So now I think I should move to the formal closing part. Now, Anandada had said on our previous session that he has cracked an offhand joke which might lead to various things. So what I am now going to say is maybe it might lead to me being misinterpreted, but I'll take the risk anyway. So the thing is, what started in our very humble, very remotely located institution as a small dream that, okay, we have to do an add-on course because the NAC team has been so vocal about it. Everyone these days, they are talking about add-on courses. And then we kept on thinking, what should we do? Some people suggested that, okay, let's have one course, যেটার শেষে একটা বেশ ভালো করে রিপোর্ট লিখে ফেলা যাবে যে আমরা একটা অ্যাড অন কোর্স করেছি, কিছু লোক টোক জয়েন করেছিল। Ultimately, what happened is that for these 2 months, technically 3 maybe, April, May, June, because we are almost nearing the end of June, each evening ended up bringing the students back in us, the organizers. Some of the participants have been very kind, very loving to constantly remind me that they have loved this experience of going back to a classroom. I had said this about Shubhankar Das session, Shubhankar Ghosh Rai Choudhury, that is, who spoke this week about his very personal methods of translating Shakespearean sonnets. যে আজকের এই পৃথিবীর মধ্যে এত অশান্তির মধ্যে কোথাও এই ভাবনাটা ভাবতে ভালো লাগে যে সপ্তাহের মধ্যে একটা সময় আমরা বেশ কয়েকজন যারা পড়াশুনো ভালোবাসি, যারা অনুবাদ ভালোবাসি, সাহিত্য ভালোবাসি, ঠিক এক জায়গায় হয়ে যাব, সাথে থাকবেন একজন যিনি গাইড করবেন এবং ওকে, হ্যাঁ, এবার আমি বিক্রম, ব্যাপারটা হচ্ছে এইটা নিয়ে না এখন মনে হয় কথাটা না তোলাই ভালো। তার কারণ এখানে ব্যাপারটা হচ্ছে প্রথমত ওটা জয় গোস্বামী তো নয়, মানে বিক্রম প্লিজ ডোন্ট মিসআন্ডারস্ট্যান্ড মি, আই এম জাস্ট ট্রাইং টু কারেক্ট ইউ। হ্যাঁ, মানে ওটা জয় গোস্বামী সম্ভবত নয়। আচ্ছা আনন্দদা, আমি বলে দিচ্ছি, ব্যাপারটা হচ্ছে শক্তি চট্টোপাধ্যায় রবার্ট ফ্রস্টের রোড নট টেক, না রোড নট টেকেন তো না, স্টপিং বাই উডস, সেইটার অনুবাদ করতে গিয়ে ডাউনি ফ্লেক্সের অনুবাদ করেছিলেন বিধুর বোন, এবং সেইটা নিয়ে শুভঙ্কর দা তার মতো করে কিছু কথা বলেছে। এবার বিক্রম, না বিক্রমের কোয়ারিটাকে আমি অ্যাপ্রিসিয়েট করি, হ্যাঁ আমি খুবই অ্যাপ্রিসিয়েট করি। বিক্রম সেটা নিয়ে একটা আপনার টেক চাইছে। এবার আমি আপনি টেকটা দিলে অবশ্যই ঠিকই আছে, মানে আমরা সমৃদ্ধ হব। আমি একটাই কথা বলছিলাম যে যেহেতু শুভঙ্কর দাও এখানে উপস্থিত নেই, এটা একটু মানে আর কি।
শুভঙ্কর কি বলেছিল?
শুভঙ্কর দা কিছু করেনি খুব একটা। শুভঙ্কর দা এই বিধুর বোন শব্দটা করার ফলে ডাউনি ফ্লেক্স নিয়ে আমাদের যে একটা মানে বাঙালি পাঠক পাঠিকাদের যে একটা অসুবিধা হতে পারে, সেই ব্যাপারটাকে শক্তিবাবু কিভাবে সামাল দিতে পেরেছেন বা পারেননি সেটা নিয়ে 2-4টে কথা বলেছিল, এই আর কি। এখন বিক্রম আপনার টেকটা জানতে চাইছে, এবং আমি আবারও বলছি, আই রিয়েলি অ্যাপ্রিসিয়েট দ্য কোয়েশ্চেন। তো আনন্দদা, ইফ ইউ ওয়ান্ট।
দেখো, এরকম ডিটেল হতেই পারে যেখানে আমরা যারা অরিজিনালটা জানি এবং অনুবাদে পড়ছি বুঝতেই পারছি যে মিলছে না। এখন যদি মানে সত্যটা কি, ইটস ওয়ান অফ দোজ extremely insoluble questions. Do you literally therefore have to translate flakes as snowflakes into Bangla, which actually in fact is virtually impossible because we don't have snow in Bengal except in the north. So how at all would you translate that? So these are things, and these were done at a time when the question of annotation, footnotes didn't arise. And Shokti, of course, himself was a poet. So when a poet translates, they are going to take liberties, typically. This idea of fidelity in translation is, at least in India, certainly in Bengal, is a relatively new concept. It's not just about Robert Frost. If you think of so many Bengali translators of major, say, French poets, Baudelaire, later on from Lorca, from Brecht, they have all taken liberties, right? So there's no end to finding problems. You have to accept that was a historical period, and this was done, and they translated in that fashion. Today, however, we may not do it. Hey.
একেবারেই একেবারেই। এবং বিক্রমকেও ধন্যবাদ জানাচ্ছি। এবার যে যে কথাটা বলছিলাম, যে এই যে আমাদের একটা অদ্ভুত ছন্দে আমাদের গত মাসগুলো কেটেছে, এর মধ্যে দিয়ে শেষ পর্যন্ত সবাই একটা করে সার্টিফিকেট তো পাবেন, সেটা ঠিকই আছে, সেটা প্র্যাকটিক্যাল পয়েন্ট অফ ভিউ থেকে একটা কনসার্ন বটে। কিন্তু সত্যি বলতে গেলে আমরা কখন যে একটা আস্ত পৃথিবী তৈরি করে ফেললাম, যেখানে আমাদের এত সুন্দর সুন্দর সব প্রশ্ন, আর আমাদের এত মানে কাইন্ড রিসোর্স পার্সনস, মানে আনন্দদা, আমি এটাও বলবো যে আমাদের রিসোর্স পার্সন হিসেবে আপনারা প্রত্যেকে, আপনারা যেভাবে ধৈর্য নিয়ে আমাদের প্রশ্নগুলি শুনেছেন সবার এবং উত্তর দিয়েছেন, সেটাও আমাদের একটা বড় প্রাপ্তি। এবং আপনার একটু মজা করেই বলছি, আপনার এই দিরাগমন আজকে, হ্যাঁ, সেইটা আমাদের একেবারে একটা, মানে যেটা আপনাকে আমি ফোনে বলেছিলাম, কোডা অফ লাভ, ওয়েলকাম সারপ্লাস, সেটা তো হয়ে থাকলোই। আর আমি যদি একটু বেশি বাড়াবাড়ি করে ফেলি তার জন্য আমি লজ্জিত, কিন্তু বোধহয় আজ এই দুটো কোর্স মিলিয়ে আমরা এখানে কেউ কেউ যাদবপুর বিশ্ববিদ্যালয়ের ছাত্রছাত্রী অবশ্যই আছেন, কিন্তু তার বাইরে আমরা যারা যাদবপুরে পড়িনি তারাও কিন্তু আপনার ছাত্রছাত্রী হয়ে গেলাম এই দুটো সেশন মিলিয়ে। এবং আমার মনে হয় যে আমি একটা কথা প্রায়ই বলি যে প্রাক্তন ছাত্র বা প্রাক্তন ছাত্রী বলে বোধহয় কিছু হয় না। আমরা যদি একবার কারো ছাত্রছাত্রী হয়ে যাই, সে সম্পর্কটা সারা জীবনের। তো আমরা থেকে গেলাম আপনার ছাত্রছাত্রী হয়ে, আরো অনেক অনেক কিছু শিখতে হবে আপনার থেকে। আর দেখি ভবিষ্যতে আবার আপনাকে কোনো একদিন আমরা আমাদের মধ্যে এরকম সন্ধেবেলায় নিয়ে আসবো, আরো অনেক 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 কিছু নিয়ে কথা বলা বাকি থাকলো। আর একটু নির্লজ্জ রকমের প্রচারও করে দিই, সেটা হচ্ছে আনন্দদা কিন্তু ঠিক এক সপ্তাহের মতো গ্যাপের মধ্যে শনিবার যে টপিকটি নিয়ে বলছেন সেটা নিয়ে আনন্দদাই বলতে পারেন। তার কারণ আনন্দদার টেলারের, না ঠিক আছে আনন্দদা, মানে আমি জানি আমি বাড়াবাড়ি করছি, কিন্তু আমি একটু বলবো এই জায়গাটা, সেটা হচ্ছে টেলার অ্যান্ড ফ্রান্সিসের হয়ে আনন্দদা রবীন্দ্রসঙ্গীত নিয়ে যে কাজটি করেছেন। আমি সকলকে এগেন, মানে টেলার অ্যান্ড ফ্রান্সিস আমাকে লক্ষ লক্ষ টাকা দেবে না কিন্তু এসব বলার জন্য। তো টেলার অ্যান্ড ফ্রান্সিসের হয়ে আনন্দদা যে কাজটি করেছেন রবীন্দ্রসঙ্গীত নিয়ে, সেইটা আমি সবাইকে অনুরোধ করব, কিনবেন কি কিনবেন না সেটা আপনাদের ব্যাপার, আপনারা একবার দেখুন অন্তত। তার কারণ এই ধরনের কাজ হওয়াটা আমাদের ভবিষ্যৎ প্রজন্মের জন্য জরুরি। তার কারণ এমনিতে একটা বই আজকাল 10 দিনে লিখেও যে এপিআই স্কোর পাওয়া যায়, আনন্দদা যে কাজটা করেছেন সেটাতে বোধহয় তার থেকে কম বেশি যা হোক সমান এপিআই হয়তো পাওয়া যাবে, কিন্তু বইয়ের গুরুত্ব তো একটা অন্য থাকে। তো সেই সব কাজের সূত্রেই আনন্দদাকে আবার আবদার করা হয়েছিল রবীন্দ্রসঙ্গীত নিয়ে দু চারটে কথা বলার। আর আমাদের কনফারেন্সে আনন্দদা যে রবীন্দ্রসঙ্গীত নিয়ে বলবেন, সেটা আমাদের একটা বিরাট প্রাপ্তি। এবং সেটার জন্য আপনাদের সকলকে আমন্ত্রণও জানিয়ে রাখছি। আপনারা শুধু লিসনার হিসেবেও যদি আসেন আমাদের খুব ভালো লাগবে। আর আনন্দদা, আপনি খুব খুব ভালো থাকুন। আপনি ভীষণ ব্যস্ততার মধ্যে রয়েছেন সেটাও আমি জানি, তবু আজ আপনি আবার এতটা সময় দিলেন, এবং আমি জানি আমরা যদি আরো 1 ঘন্টা আপনাকে আটকে রাখতাম আপনি থেকে যেতেন, কিন্তু সেটা আমরা করব না। আর সুলগ্না আর সঞ্চিতা দুটো কমেন্ট করেছেন, আপনি যদি দেখতে পান তাহলে আমি আর পড়বো না, আর না হলে আমি পড়ে দেবো।
পড়ে দাও, কারণ আমি দেখিনি।
বেশ, হ্যাঁ, আমি সেজন্যই, আমার আন্দাজ হলো সেটা। সুলগ্না বলছেন, সমমনস্ক মানুষদের এক জায়গায় আসতে পারা, জ্ঞান চর্চার মধ্যে দিয়ে বিকল্প উদার আকাশ নির্মাণ এই বিক্ষুব্ধ সময়ের সব থেকে বড় দাবি বলে আমার মনে হয়। অনুবাদের পরিসরে আমরা সম্ভবত সবাই সেই বড় আকাশের তলায় এসে দাঁড়াতে পেরেছি। এই প্রাপ্তির মূল্য অপরিসীম। তারপর একটা পড়ছি না, ওটা আমার নাম করে, এবং মানিকচক কলেজের সবাইকে ধন্যবাদ। তো সেটা আর পড়লাম না। আর সঞ্চিতাও দুটো কথা বলেছেন, সেটা আমি পড়ে দিই। I feel like saying this without saying which it would have stayed with me. I am amazed to know sir by witnessing his patience and kindness, not only in this session but also in the former session, that I feel privileged to listen to sir, to know him as a person. Thanks to sir and congratulations to etc. etc.
অনেক ধন্যবাদ, থ্যাংক ইউ।
ঠিক আছে আনন্দদা, আমরা তাহলে আজ